For much of the 20th century, the story of early human history followed a structured path. Small groups of hunter-gatherers moved across landscapes in search of food. Over time, some of these groups began to settle. Agriculture emerged. With farming came surplus, and from surplus came hierarchy, religion, and eventually monumental architecture. This sequence appeared logical. It linked survival to stability and stability to complexity. It placed religion and large-scale construction near the end of a long developmental process. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe forced that sequence into question. Located in southeastern Turkey near the modern city of Şanlıurfa, Göbekli Tepe sits on a modest limestone ridge overlooking a wide plain. Today, the region is part of what historians call the Fertile Crescent, an area long associated with the earliest developments of agriculture and settled life. Yet the significance of this hill was not recognized for decades. In the 1960s, surveys conducted in the region noted scattered stone fragments and an artificial mound. At the time, these remains were interpreted as relatively recent, perhaps medieval. The site was cataloged but not prioritized. There was nothing to suggest that it held evidence of one of the oldest known monumental complexes in human history. That perception changed in 1994, when systematic excavations began under the direction of Klaus Schmidt. Schmidt, working with the German Archaeological Institute, quickly recognized that the site was far older than previously believed. As excavation progressed, layers of soil revealed massive carved limestone pillars arranged in circular formations. Radiocarbon dating soon placed the earliest structures at around 9600 BCE, during a period known as the pre-pottery Neolithic. This was a time before ceramics, before metal tools, and before fully developed agriculture in the region. The implication was immediate and profound. These structures had been built by communities that, according to previous models, should not have had the capacity for such coordinated labor or architectural planning. The layout of Göbekli Tepe consists of multiple circular and oval enclosures. Each enclosure contains a ring of upright pillars, with two larger pillars standing near the center. These central pillars dominate the space, rising higher than the surrounding stones. Many of them exceed 5 meters in height and weigh several tons. Their surfaces are carefully smooth and decorated with carved reliefs. The pillars themselves are shaped in a distinctive T form. Closer examination reveals that some include carved arms, hands, and belts, suggesting that they represent stylized human figures. The central pillars, in particular, appear almost anthropomorphic, as if they embody specific beings or identities. This feature distinguishes Göbekli Tepe from later architectural traditions, where human figures are usually separate from structural elements. Around the central pillars, the outer ring forms an enclosed space. The arrangement is not random. Each enclosure follows a deliberate design, with carefully positioned stones, creating a defined interior. Multiple enclosures have been identified, and geophysical surveys indicate that many more remain buried beneath the surface. The construction of these structures required significant effort. Limestone was quarried from nearby bedrock using stone tools, likely made of flint. Blocks were cut, shaped, and transported short distances to the construction site. Erecting pillars of this size would have required coordinated groups, planning, and some form of leadership or shared decision-making. What makes this even more remarkable is the absence of typical settlement features. Excavations have revealed very little evidence of domestic life. There are no clear remains of houses, no permanent hearths associated with daily living, and no signs of long-term habitation within the core areas of the site. This suggests that Göbekli Tepe was not a village or town in the conventional sense. Instead, it appears to have been a place that people visited. This interpretation is supported by the presence of large quantities of animal bones. These remains indicate that animals such as gazelle, wild cattle, and deer were brought to the site and consumed in significant numbers. The scale of this activity suggests gatherings that went beyond ordinary subsistence. It points to communal events, possibly seasonal, where groups came together for shared purposes. To understand the historical importance of Göbekli Tepe, it is useful to place it alongside other early sites in the region. The ancient settlement of Jericho, for example, shows evidence of early permanent habitation and defensive structures dating to a similar general period. However, Jericho is clearly a settlement, with architecture tied to daily life. Later sites like Çatalhöyük, dating to around 7000 BCE, display dense urban layouts, domestic buildings, and elaborate wall paintings. These represent communities that had already adopted agriculture and developed more complex social systems. Göbekli Tepe stands apart from both. It is older than Çatalhöyük and differs in function from Jericho. It lacks the features of a permanent settlement, yet surpasses both in the scale and symbolic richness of its monumental structures. The carvings on the pillars provide further insight into the worldview of the people who built the site. Animals dominate the imagery. Foxes, snakes, vultures, boars, and various birds appear frequently. Many of these creatures are depicted in dynamic poses, emphasizing movement and tension. Some reliefs are highly detailed, showing musculature and posture, while others are more abstract. The selection of animals is striking. Many of the depicted species are not the primary sources of food. Instead, they include predators or animals associated with danger and unpredictability. This has led researchers to suggest that the carvings may represent symbolic concepts rather than simple representations of the natural environment. In addition to animals, there are abstract symbols that do not correspond clearly to identifiable objects. These may represent early forms of symbolic communication. While not writing in the conventional sense, they could have conveyed meaning within the cultural context of the people who use the site. The anthropomorphic features of the pillars add another layer of interpretation. The carved arms and hands suggest that the pillars themselves were meant to be seen as beings rather than mere structural supports. The central pillars, larger and more prominent, have represented ancestors, spirits, or figures of special significance within the community. The use of space within the enclosures also suggests intentional design related to experience. The circular layout creates a defined interior, possibly intended for gatherings, rituals, or performances. The positioning of the central pillars would have drawn attention inward, focusing activity on the center of the enclosure. One of the most intriguing aspects of Göbekli Tepe is its long period of use. The site was not built in a single phase. Instead, it developed over centuries. Earlier enclosures were constructed, used, and eventually buried. New enclosures were built on top of or near the older ones. This pattern of construction and burial indicates continuity, but also change. It suggests that the site remained important over multiple generations, even as practices and structures evolved. The burial of the enclosures is particularly significant. Around 8000 BCE, the site was deliberately filled with soil, stone fragments, and debris. This was not a natural process. The fill material appears to have been intentionally placed, covering the structures and preserving them. The reasons for this burial are still debated. One possibility is that it represents a form of ritual closure. In many cultures, sacred spaces are not simply abandoned. They are formally closed or transformed. Filling the enclosures may have been a way to mark the end of their use, while preserving their significance. Another possibility is that the burial reflects broader social changes. Around this time, evidence for agriculture becomes more prominent in the region. Communities began to settle more permanently, cultivating crops and domesticating animals. As these changes took place, the role of sites like Göbekli Tepe may have shifted or diminished. This brings us to one of the central historical questions raised by the site. Did the kind of social organization required to build Göbekli Tepe contribute to the development of agriculture, or did early forms of agriculture already exist and support such construction? Some researchers argue that large gatherings at the site would have required reliable food sources, encouraging the cultivation of plants. In this view, shared activities, possible ritual or social in nature, help drive the transition toward farming. Others suggest that small-scale cultivation may have already been underway, providing the surplus needed to support construction. In this interpretation, Göbekli Tepe is part of a broader process in which multiple developments, including farming and social organization, occurred together. What is clear is that the site reflects a level of coordination and shared purpose that challenges earlier assumptions about hunter-gatherer societies. These were not loosely organized groups acting only in response to immediate needs. They were capable of planning, cooperation, and the creation of enduring structures. The broader historical significance of Göbekli Tepe lies in this shift of perspective. It suggests that symbolic thought, shared identity, and collective action were present earlier than previously believed. It indicates that the foundations of complex society may have been laid not only through economic changes, but also through shared ideas and experiences. As excavation continues, only a small portion of the site has been uncovered. Geophysical surveys indicate that many more structures remain buried beneath the surface. Each new discovery has the potential to refine or reshape current interpretations. Göbekli Tepe does not provide all the answers. Instead, it raises new questions about the origins of social complexity, the role of shared spaces, and the relationship between belief and daily life. It reminds us that history is not a fixed sequence of events, but an evolving understanding shaped by new evidence. The hill in southeastern Turkey stands as a record of human activity at a moment when the boundaries between mobility and settlement, between survival and symbolism, were still being defined. In that sense, Göbekli Tepe is not only one of the oldest known monumental sites, it is also one of the most important for understanding how human history itself began to take shape.